They fined me $400 for parking on my own gravel, 3 feet from where the pavement ends. When I came back after 91 days away, the HOA had built a fence across my driveway, with a red "No Trespassing" banner like it was a crime scene. Welcome to my channel. I'm Luke Hartman, civil engineer out of Bozeman, Montana. I tell true stories of ordinary homeowners standing up to absurd HOA power trips. If you believe neighbors deserve fairness, subscribe now, and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The first time I saw that fence, the morning sun hadn't even burned the frost off the grass. My old log cabin stood 50 yards behind the barricade, roofline framed by pines. It was the same cabin my dad built in '94, the place he swore would always be ours. He died 5 years ago, cancer, and his one rule was simple: keep the land open. No walls, no gates, no pettiness. So when the HOA posted that red sign across my drive, it felt like watching his promise get padlocked shut. I parked by the ditch, careful not to block the county road. The barrier was new. Fresh lumber smell, hinges still shiny. I could hear a humming generator beyond it. Someone had set up motion cameras on poles. When I called the HOA office, a receptionist said, "Access restricted pending compliance review." Compliance for what? My taxes were current, my title clean. I'd been gone working a hydrology contract in Idaho for 3 months. I asked her who authorized the fence. She said, "Mr. Brenner, the HOA president." Then quieter. "He says it's an easement dispute." Easement. My father's voice echoed in memory. Always record your easements twice. Once with the county, once with yourself. I still had the folder in the glove box, binder clipped, labeled Access. I flipped it open right there. Recorded March 12, 1994. 50-foot ingress/egress right-of-way. Perpetuous. To all. Recorded and notarized. Still valid. I drove straight to the county clerk's office in town. The clerk, a woman named Alma with coffee breath and kind eyes, looked it up. "Still active," she said. "No amendments, no closures." She printed me a stamped copy. That night I emailed Brenner a scan. I wrote, "Please remove the obstruction by tomorrow 5 p.m. or I'll contact the sheriff." He replied an hour later, "You'll contact no one. You're in violation of revised Section 6B, temporary absence exceeding 60 days without board notice. Property deemed inactive, subject to preservation measures." I had never even heard of Section 6B. When I asked for a copy of that section, they refused. That was my first red flag. HOAs can't withhold governing documents under Montana's Common Interest Community Act. Knowledge nugget number 1. Under FARBOR 70-23-603 MCA, any member may inspect and copy association records during reasonable hours, including amendments and financial statements. Denying that right can void enforcement actions. The next morning, I walked the perimeter fence, camera rolling. I kept my tone calm, narrating each post, each "No Trespassing" sign. The smell of pine sap mixed with the metallic tang of the new nails. Behind the fence, I saw a hired guard sitting in a folding chair. He raised a hand half-heartedly, like he didn't want trouble. I said, "This is my land, friend." He said, "Not my call." 2 neighbors stopped by, Doris and Len, retirees from down the lane. Doris brought coffee and travel mugs. "They're going too far this time," she said. Len added, "They fined me last month for bird feeders, said they attract undesired species." We laughed, but there was bitterness in it. I started collecting every notice, every fine, scanning and tagging them by date. I built a timeline on my laptop, color-coded. Brenner's pattern was clear. Anyone who questioned him got hit with selective enforcement. Trash cans, porch paint, mailbox height. Tiny things turned into control tactics. When I called a special meeting, the board canceled it for security concerns. That's when I knew it wasn't just about me. It was about precedent. If he could fence me out, he could fence anyone out. That weekend I filed an official records request under FARBOR 70-23-603. Certified mail, return receipt. 3 days later, instead of documents, I got a violation notice for unauthorized recording devices. Apparently, my phone camera was monitoring association assets. It was laughable, if it hadn't come with a $250 fine. I met with my friend Marcus, local journalist, wiry guy, always scribbling notes on diner napkins. He said, "This smells like a power play. You mind if I look into Brenner's filings?" I nodded. Marcus had sources in the county permitting office. He promised to check if any new plat maps were filed. That night, I sat on my tailgate, watching the porch light flicker through the trees. I thought about my dad, about how proud he was the day we wired that cabin ourselves. I could almost smell the cedar sawdust again. I made a quiet promise out loud. "I'll get it back the right way, Dad. No shortcuts." And that's how it started, the long, careful undoing of a fence that never should have been there. Marcus called 2 days later while I was marking property stakes in the cold. "Found something," he said. "Brenner filed a boundary adjustment on June 18th, claims a 50-foot buffer zone for environmental maintenance. But here's the kicker. The plat was stamped preliminary, never approved." His pen tapped through the phone speaker. "He fenced you out using a draft." T gave me both fury and clarity. The smell of thawing soil, the echo of crows overhead, it all sharpened into focus. I drove to the county GIS office, requested the public map, and printed the overlay myself. My cabin lot was Parcel 14B. The so-called buffer was labeled pending, not recorded, not binding. That night I slid the maps under the fence for Brenner's security guard. "Tell your boss to read the legend," I said. An hour later, headlights raked across my truck. A white SUV rolled up. Brenner stepped out wearing his signature fleece vest, clipboard in hand. "You can't be here, Luke," he said. "The board voted to preserve the lake perimeter. You can appeal in writing." I held up the stamped easement. "That's my appeal." He smirked. "We'll see what the sheriff says when he shows up." So I waited, with the county plat spread across my tailgate. When Deputy Carson arrived, his boots crunching gravel, he looked between us. "You got paperwork, Luke?" "Right here." Carson read it, whistled low. "Looks valid. Brenner, unless you've got a court order, you can't block a recorded right-of-way." Brenner's jaw tightened. "We'll file for one." I could feel the cold seeping through my jeans as the deputy left, leaving us in silence. Brenner said quietly, "You're making enemies you can't afford." "Then I'm already over budget," I replied. That line felt good until the retaliation started. Within a week, $150 citation for improper vegetation management. I'd trimmed wild grass. 2 HOA board members posted my non-compliance notice on the community board. Anonymous complaint triggered a welfare check by county officers. Each one documented, time-stamped, logged. I made sure of it. About that time, I brought in Allison Eng, a property attorney from Helena with ink-stained cuffs and a habit of humming when she read fine print. She spread the HOA bylaws across. "That's my dining table. Coffee mugs as paperweights. This clause here," she said, tapping Section 6B, "was inserted without a member vote. See the font change." We traced the amendment history. The document was revised in May, but the signature page dated April. "Fraudulent sequencing." She grinned. "That's our first nail." Knowledge nugget number 2. HOA amendments require majority approval of all members unless the governing documents specify a lower threshold. Filing an unapproved amendment is filing a false instrument, punishable under state statute. FAR 45-7-208 MCA. Allison drafted a demand letter citing the code. We mailed it certified, gave them 10 business days to retract or prove authorization. Meanwhile, Marcus dug deeper. "You'll like this," he said over late-night coffee at the diner. Brenner's landscaping company billed the HOA $42,000 last quarter for erosion control. Guess whose parcels border that work order? Yours and Len's. It clicked. He was fencing properties to funnel contracts. The HOA had become his private vendor pipeline. That same week, I posted the first community notice board message allowed under bylaws. Polite, factual. Titled Request for Transparency on Section 6B. It drew 30 signatures in 2 days. The next morning, someone ripped it down. I reposted it with a line of duct tape across the top. Removed twice, recorded for accountability. That one stayed up. Before long, small conversations started. Doris told me the HOA was pushing for new view corridor restrictions, threatening fines for porch flags and kids' bikes. "It's like he wants silence," she said. I told her, Silence is his product. That weekend, I set up a folding table by the gate and offered free coffee. I printed copies of the real Section 6B and the fraudulent one. Neighbors compared the two, muttering. One man, James, a retired CPA, said, "You know, selective enforcement like this could void every fine they've issued this year." Exactly what I needed. In the middle of that small gathering, Brenner's SUV idled nearby. He watched us, jaw working like he was chewing glass. "Afraid of neighbors talking?" I called out. He drove off without a word. Later that night, under porch light, I compiled our findings into folders labeled Records, Finance, Easement. Allison's strategy was simple. Build a wall of lawful proof before making any move. The second engagement moment arrived naturally. I looked at the camera I'd mounted on the truck dash and said, "If you've ever fought an HOA, tell us your story below. And if you haven't, stick around. You'll see exactly how we take one apart piece by piece. Any board members watching, this is your chance to learn how to do it right." The investigation deepened from there. Marcus requested bank statements under the community's open records clause. Brenner refused, citing privacy. Allison smiled. "That's violation number 2. We started the countdown quietly. By late September, I had 23 neighbors quietly backing me. The folder labeled Records was now thick with emails, scanned notices, and Allison's correspondence. Every page smelled faintly of toner and burnt coffee from the copy shop where I'd been living half my evenings. We were close to something, though I didn't yet know what leverage would look like. The morning of the next HOA open meeting, Brenner posted guards again. No agenda, no minutes circulated. When I stepped onto the gravel lot, his voice boomed from the loudspeaker. "Non-compliant members must remain outside until called." I stayed quiet, filming from the sidewalk. The absurdity of it all wasn't lost on me. A volunteer board acting like federal agents. That night, I met Allison and Marcus in the diner booth under the flickering Budweiser sign. She unrolled a copy of the HOA's insurance certificate. "Policy expires December 31st. Renewal requires disclosure of any pending disputes," she said. "If we file a formal complaint now, they must report it to their carrier or risk coverage cancellation." Marcus grinned. "So if they lie, they lose insurance." "That's right," she said, "and no insurance means no board." Knowledge nugget number 3. Most HOAs carry directors' officers (DO) liability coverage. Failure to disclose known conflicts, unapproved amendments, or active disputes can void coverage retroactively. We drafted a certified complaint addressed to both the board and the insurer's regional office in Denver. It listed each violation, attached the fraudulent amendment, and referenced the unapproved fence construction. For once, I slept easy that night, until the next morning when I woke to find a new violation taped to my mailbox. Unauthorized signage promoting dissent, $350 fine. They meant the transparency notice. I laughed, then documented it. A few days later, Allison called. "Denver received our complaint. They've opened an underwriting review. 2 weeks, maybe less." That was the first time I sensed the clock ticking for Brenner instead of me. Marcus came by the cabin, now that the gate was occasionally unmanned. He brought his old Nikon. "Mind if I get a few shots?" he asked. "The fence, the sign, your dad's place. It'll help the story." "Go ahead," I said, brushing dust from the porch rail. He snapped photos, the red banner flapping, the reflection of the lake, my hand holding the easement document. It felt strangely ceremonial, like we were recording evidence for history, not just a news piece. That evening, Doris knocked with a casserole and whispered, "Board's meeting tomorrow. Closed session. They're panicking." I nodded. "Let them stew." The next day, Brenner sent an all-members email titled, "Preservation Efforts Misunderstood." It painted me as a disgruntled contractor, misinterpreting legal boundaries. He even attached cropped photos implying I'd parked heavy equipment near the lake. Marcus traced the metadata, taken 2 years ago before I sold that truck. I drafted my response carefully. No he. At just facts. Timestamps, coordinates, and county permits attached. I hit send to all. By morning, 10 more neighbors replied in support. One wrote, "If Luke's wrong, prove it publicly." Momentum shifted. Still, I knew Brenner would escalate. He always did. And sure enough, a week later I returned home to find a notice of foreclosure intent taped to my fence post, claiming unpaid dues of $1,800. I checked my ledger, fully paid, cleared through my bank on August 3rd. Fraudulent notice number 2. Allison reviewed it. This crosses into criminal territory. They've recorded false debt. We filed a written demand for retraction with the county recorder. She looked at me over her glasses. Luke, you realize if they double down, we can't just wait for audits. We'll need leverage before December. I'm working on it, I said, though I didn't yet know how. That night, flipping through old papers, I found my father's original loan documents, paid off in 2010, but also a deed reference to an easement assignment clause. It allowed the rights to be reassigned or expanded for community access. My father had written, "for future protection," in the margin. That was my opening. If I could reassign that right under a shell LLC, I could effectively own the access route that Brenner's fence crossed. So I created Cedarline Holdings, LLC, registered October 2nd, quietly, with a $25 filing fee. No public connection to my name. The next week, I executed an assignment of easement rights from myself to the LLC, notarized and filed. The fence now legally stood on Cedarline's access route, not the HOA's. I didn't tell a soul except Allison. She smiled when she saw the document. "That's our secret leverage," she whispered. We planned to hold it until the right moment. Before long, retaliation got personal. HOA volunteers, Brenner's loyal few, followed me on walks, filmed me trimming bras. Inches reported me for unauthorized tool use. I documented everything: times, names, badge numbers. The harassment montage wrote itself. Once, at midnight, someone threw a bag of paint chips at my truck windshield. The next morning, Brenner emailed, "Your vehicle appears defaced. Please remove unsightly materials within 24 hours. That was when I felt the first real fear. I set up cameras, changed locks, and stayed armed only with paper, copies, logs, receipts. Still, every act of pettiness only fueled resolve. Late October brought our turning point. Allison reviewed the insurer's update. Investigation pending non-disclosure verification. Marcus prepped his article, though he agreed to hold publication. We were almost there, 31 days from policy expiry. I sat on the porch that evening, pen tapping against the easement folder, feeling the mountain air sting my skin. Somewhere inside the cabin, my dad's old clock ticked steady. "Almost home, Dad," I murmured. Outside, the fence stood like a dare. By early November, winter had started to creep in, the kind of dry cold that bites through gloves and makes metal tools sting your hands. I'd begun counting days, 49 until the HOA's insurance renewal. Brenner didn't know it, but every move he made was running out of coverage. Then came the email blast titled Emergency Special Assessment Vote. It claimed we needed $80,000 for security upgrades to stop property trespass and misinformation. The message included one photo: me, mid-argument at the gate, frozen mid-sentence. I almost admired his nerve. Allison called. "If he collects that assessment, it's fraud. But if we let him vote, we'll expose it." So we planned to let him hang himself with process. We printed voter notices, lined up proxies. Doris, Len, James, 12 more. All lawful, notarized. The night before the vote, I heard engines outside. 2 men with flashlights paced near my truck, snapping photos. I stepped out, hands visible. One muttered, "Documenting compliance." They left without a word. The next morning, I found tire tracks looping my drive. I logged everything, time-stamped photos, written notes. I didn't need revenge. I needed record. The vote was held in the rec center gym. Brenner stood behind a folding table, flag backdrop, clipboard on display. He spoke in that steady salesman tone. "We're protecting community value. A few bad actors can't derail safety." When it was my turn, I walked to the mic. "Can you show members the contractor quotes for these so-called security upgrades?" He blinked. "That's confidential." "Then how can we vote on a cost breakdown we can't see?" Murmurs spread through the crowd. Doris whispered, "He's slipping." I waited until the last ballot was cast. When he called adjournment, I stepped up again. "Mr. Brenner, I've recorded tonight's vote tally and statements. As a member, I'm requesting copies under Section 603. He snapped, You and your lawyer can request it formally. Allison already did, I said. Filed yesterday. County timestamp 4:13 p.m. His jaw clicked, but he said nothing. When I left the building, the first snow started to fall, thin flakes drifting under the lamplight. I stood for a moment, watching them melt on the still warm hood of my truck. The smell of wet asphalt mixed with exhaust and cold metal. Marcus met me back at the diner. I got something better than his speech, he said, sliding his tablet across. On screen, HOA meeting minutes draft, accidentally emailed to him by a secretary. Inside was a line stating, "Assessment passed unanimously. Vote count not disclosed." Unanimous? I'd seen at least 15 no votes. We now had falsified minutes, on top of everything else. Allison laughed softly. That's your trifecta. False amendment, false debt, false vote. Almost feels unfair, I said. Don't lose your cool now, she warned. The board's already calling a December 5th renewal meeting. That's your set piece. And for the first time I realized I controlled the battlefield. Knowledge nugget number 4. Under Montana law, falsifying corporate minutes is filing false evidence, a misdemeanor that voids the recorded act. If attached to financial misrepresentation, it escalates to fraud. Brenner tried one last card. He sent a mass letter claiming I'd threatened litigation and disrupted order. That week, the HOA's social feed lit up with comments, some nasty, some skeptical. But for every insult, a neighbor replied with a fact we'd published. Truth was finally louder. The next Saturday, I visited Len. He was sanding birdhouse frames in his garage, radio humming. He's finished, Luke, he said, wiping sawdust from his palms. But we need something better when he's gone. We can't just burn it down. That line stuck with me. I didn't want ashes. I wanted reform. So I wrote a quiet speech for the meeting. No anger, just evidence and law. A confession of sorts, not of guilt, but of perseverance. Late that night, I sat by the window, watching snow gather along the fence. The red banner was half buried, sagging under weight. I almost felt sorry for it, an emblem of control collapsing under something as simple as weather. From the street came the faint hum of an engine. I peeked out, Brenner's SUV again, idling. Headlights off. He sat there for a full minute, then drove away. I exhaled slowly, feeling both pity and resolve. The next time we met, it would be public, recorded, and final. Before turning in, I recorded a short message for my channel. How far should an HOA go in protecting aesthetics before it crosses into tyranny? Tell me below, or at least like the video if you think we've gone too far. Then I looked at the cedar wall clock, its second hand clicking forward. 26 days left. December crept in like a silent witness. Ice forming along the gateposts, frost tracing patterns on the metal "No Trespassing" sign. I'd stopped feeling anger weeks ago. By now it was precision, every detail lined up like survey stakes in frozen ground. Brenner's final push came by certified mail. Notice of rule violation hearing, December 5th, 6 p.m. Community Hall. The letter accused me of public defamation of the board and misuse of social platforms. It warned of membership suspension pending compliance. I read it twice, then smiled. This was the moment Allison had predicted. The HOA had officially opened a hearing, meaning it was now subject to public record. We prepared. Allison stacked our evidence binders, one red, one blue, one gray. Red held the forged amendment, blue, the false foreclosure, gray, the easement assignment, our hidden queen on the chessboard. Marcus arranged his camera gear, ensuring every page, every reaction, would be visible. The day of the hearing, snow blanketed the lot. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Folding chairs lined the walls. Neighbors whispered as I walked in. Allison at my side, calm as always. Brenner opened with theater. This hearing addresses willful slander and violation of Section 6B. He waved a sheaf of papers. We act only to preserve order. Allison stood. We move to dismiss on procedural grounds, she said. Section 6B was never adopted by member vote. Evidence attached. She handed over the red binder. Brenner's eyes flicked down, then back up. Irrelevant. The board has discretion. Not when you falsify amendments, she replied. That's criminal filing under 445(7)(208) MCA. The room stirred. Chairs creaked. He slammed a palm on the table. "You're out of line." I spoke then, voice steady. "Actually, Mr. Brenner, you're out of coverage." I slid the gray binder forward, the easement assignment. "As of October 2nd, Cedar Line Holdings owns this access route. You've fenced off property belonging to an independent entity. That entity is me." The Esquiitomao. Islands cracked like ice underfoot. Brenner blinked. You can't just assign an easement." Allison corrected him gently. "You can if the original deed allows transfer. Recorded October 3rd, Book 18, page 442. The fence now stands on private ingress. Any further obstruction is trespass." The room broke into whispers. Then came the neutral authority. Officer Carson standing by the door, uniform crisp. "Mr. Brenner," he said, voice carrying, "I've reviewed these filings. The assignment's legitimate. You'll need to remove the barrier or face a civil trespass citation." Visual beat number 1 locked into memory. The red "No Trespassing" banner sagging as Brenner's hand dropped, papers shaking slightly under the fluorescent hum. He tried one last bluff. "You'll never get support for your vendetta." I said, "This was never about me. It's about every homeowner tired of intimidation disguised as policy." Marcus's camera light blinked once, recording the line. The board called a recess, voices muffled behind the closed door. We waited, the smell of old coffee drifting from a percolator in the corner. Doris patted my shoulder. "You did it, honey. You really did." I wasn't celebrating yet. Brenner always had another move. He'd try to control the fallout. Sure enough, the next day, a clarification email went out to all members, claiming the fence would be temporarily adjusted pending further review. No apology, no admission. But something had shifted. The insurer, having received our formal complaint weeks ago, now contacted the HOA for confirmation of pending disputes. They replied evasively, listing only minor member concerns. When the insurer asked for documentation, they stalled. Marcus called from his newsroom. "Their policy's under suspension until disclosure is verified. You've hit them where it hurts." For the first time, I allowed myself to exhale fully. But victory attracts noise. 2 nights later, a rock cracked my porch light. The bulb popped. Glow, ass raining over the steps. I called the sheriff, non-emergency line, filed the report. No dramatics, just procedure. The next morning, I uploaded a short reflection. Fines, citations, even vandalism, still cheaper than losing your rights. Ever fought back lawfully? Drop your story below. Let's build a library of wins. That night, I sat by the stove, watching flames dance. The red banner outside now flapped in pieces. Len dropped by, carrying 2 mugs of cocoa. "What now?" he asked. "Now," I said. "We wait for the dominoes." He chuckled. "You sound like your dad." I smiled. That's the goal. As snow thickened outside, the fence creaked under its own weight. Time, it seemed, was finally on my side. By mid-December, the wind carried the smell of wood smoke and diesel from the plow trucks that scraped the main road at dawn. I'd been keeping a handwritten log, dates, calls, sightings, so complete that Allison joked it could double as discovery evidence. The binder edges were soft now, pages curling from use. On December 5th, the county hall filled again. This time, the chairs were packed. Neighbors, a reporter, even a few board members who'd started to distance themselves from Brenner. His fleece vest was gone, replaced by a stiff blazer that didn't fit his shoulders. He looked smaller. He tried to open with confidence. "We'll proceed with routine business, budget, renewals, board certification." But the county inspector, Ms. Albright, raised her hand. "Before you proceed, I need to confirm that the association's insurance policy is active. Our office received notice of suspension pending undisclosed disputes." The room buzzed. Brenner stammered, "That's a clerical error." She nodded to me. "Mr. Hartman, your submission package was complete and time-stamped. Thank you for cooperating." Visual beat number 2. Rain beaded on the microphone at the center table. Albright's seal. A board glistening under fluorescent light, Brenner's reflection trembling on the polished surface. Allison stepped forward. "For the record, my client has secured lawful ingress through recorded assignment, confirmed by the Sheriff's Department. The association's obstruction is illegal. We request immediate removal orders." The inspector signed a form, her pen's click echoing through the hall. "So ordered. Enforcement within 7 days." Brenner looked like someone had pulled the floor from under him. The crowd erupted in whispers, but I kept my tone calm. This isn't victory. It's correction. Outside, camera flashes popped. Marcus had gone live. Local HOA caught fencing off homeowner's property. Insurance suspended, his caption read. By that evening, 3 board members resigned via email. Doris forwarded them to me, her message short: dominoes, falling. Over the next week, we documented the unraveling. Contractors arrived to dismantle the fence. Brenner avoided the site, citing health reasons. Len and I stood by as the last board-approved plank hit the flatbed truck. I kept one red "No Trespassing" sign, folded it into my binder as evidence. 2 days later, the insurance carrier issued a public statement confirming policy termination for failure to disclose ongoing disputes. That phrase became headline material. Marcus's article ran the next morning. Homeowner's legal precision ends HOA overreach. The comment section exploded, people swapping stories of small-town overreach, bogus fines, and backyard wars. I replied to a few: document, stay calm, paper beats rumor. Still, I wasn't ready to gloat. Brenner could appeal, maybe spin the narrative. But Allison reminded me, appeals cost money, and without insurance, that's on him personally. That night, I uploaded another short reflection. When rules serve control instead of community, it's time to rewrite them. If you've ever faced something similar, tell me, should HOAs have outside audits or self? Police? Where's the line? The following morning, I woke to silence, the kind that feels earned. Snow softened the cabin steps. The gate stood open. I walked the drive, boots crunching, air sharp with pine. Then came an unexpected sound. A hammer. Steady rhythm. Len was patching the old fence posts, not to rebuild, but to hang a simple wooden sign carved with burned letters. Welcome home. He smiled. Figured you'd want something less confrontational. I laughed, the first real one in months. That'll do. Later that day, the county mailed me confirmation. The easement assignment remained valid, unchallenged. I stored it in a fireproof box beside my father's old tool chest. But even in peace, I felt a faint restlessness, the sense that this fight wasn't singular. Every email I got from strangers proved it. That night, as wind rattled the shutters, I drafted a plan for the next HOA meeting, an open session to propose reform, transparency, term limits, published budgets, a community reset. Allison read my draft over coffee. "You're turning leverage into legacy," she said. "Or at least making sure nobody else needs a binder this thick," I answered, tapping the gray folder. The next meeting would decide if the community healed or calcified again. Either way, I'd show up, lawful, documented, unafraid. The reform meeting was set for January 9th. The holidays passed like a blur of cold mornings and quiet evenings, neighbors dropping off pie or just standing at the end of my drive to say, "Glad you stuck it out." Each one mattered. The fear that had once hummed beneath every conversation was gone, replaced by something steady. Trust earned the hard way. Allison warned me to expect a crowd. "They'll come curious, not convinced," she said. "Show them process, not vengeance." That night before the meeting, I spread every document across the table, proof of each lie, each fine, each step back to truth. My dad's old carpenter's pencil rolled against the folder's edge. I caught it before it fell and smiled. He used to say, "Measure twice, cut once." I'd spent a year measuring. Tomorrow, it was time to cut. At 6 sharp, I walked into the community hall. The air smelled of burnt coffee and winter coats. 100 chairs, nearly all filled. Brenner sat 2 rows back, not at the front this time, not holding a clipboard. His posture said everything. I took the mic. "I'm Luke Hartman. You know the story. You've lived parts of it. What matters now is what we build next." I held up the old "No Trespassing" sign, edges bent, letters faded. This was fear. We can do better. I clicked the remote, projecting scanned bylaws on the wall. Highlighted sections of falsified clauses, corrected versions, proposed amendments. Here's the plan. Term limits, 3 years. Open audits, every quarter. member vote logs published within 7 days, and an ethics panel of 5 residents, not board appointees. The room murmured. Doris raised her hand. How do we make sure it sticks? By writing it into the charter, I said. Today we sign a motion to adopt. Tomorrow we file it with the county. Brenner stood slowly. You can't just erase history, he said. His voice was smaller but still carried that salesman lilt. You'll scare off buyers, lower property values. This place was respected. Respect doesn't come from silence, I said. It comes from fairness. He hesitated, then sat back down. That's when Ms. Albright, the county inspector, entered quietly from the rear. She nodded toward me and addressed the room. I've reviewed the proposed reforms. They comply with statute. If adopted, they'll bring this HOA back into full standing and restore eligibility for insurance. Her presence, the neutral authority again, made it real. The legal bones were there. All we needed was will. We voted then and there. Ballots folded, counted, verified under watch. 91% in favor. When the result was read, applause filled the hall. Doris cried softly. Len clapped hard enough to make his hands red. Even Brenner lowered his head, lips pressed tight, as if some part of him accepted the end. I stepped back to the mic. This doesn't erase what happened, but it makes sure it can't happen again. Outside, snow fell heavy and slow. Marcus filmed from the doorway, his camera fogging from the heat inside. He whispered, "That's your ending shot." I turned slightly toward him. Not ending, pivot. Before leaving, I took one last look at the stage, the scattered ballots, the folded sign propped against the wall. Visual beat number 3 was already writing itself in my mind. That sign burning quietly in my fire pit later, curling into ash, the word trespass splitting apart. The following morning, the local news ran with Marcus's story. HOA votes 91% for reform. Former president under audit. I read it with coffee on the porch, steam curling into the cold. A message pinged from Allison. They've offered a settlement. He resigns formally. We drop civil claims. You good with that? Yes, I texted back. Justice isn't punishment. It's prevention. Later that afternoon, I filmed a segment for the channel. When a system collapses, it's not just because of greed, it's because of quiet people staying quiet too long. What do you think? Should HOAs be required to have public insurance disclosures? Tell me below. Let's debate it civilly. I ended the recording with a small smile. The cabin light glowed behind me, fence gone, gate open, sky pale gold from the winter sun. There was one more thing left to do. 2 days after the vote, I drove to the county office one last time. The roads were glassy with ice, the sky that dull pewter color before snow. I carried the reform packet under my arm, thick with signatures, stamped pages, and the new bylaws we'd built together. The clerk recognized me and smiled. "Third time this year, huh?" "Last one," I said. "Hopefully." The paper hit the counter with that heavy slap only official documents make. I watched her stamp the date, January 11th, and slide the file into the archive tray. That sound, that dull thunk of the tray closing, felt like the final lock clicking shut on everything Brenner had tried to twist. When I walked back outside, the air smelled clean. No more exhaust, no tension, just pine and cold wind over the lake. Doris and Len waited by the truck, thermoses steaming. Len said, "So that's it?" "That's it," I said. "No more secret clauses, no more midnight votes." He grinned. "You're gonna miss the chaos." "Maybe," I said, smiling back, "but I'll take quiet any day." That evening, we held a small gathering at the rec center. Not a meeting, not a hearing, just neighbors. Kids ran between chairs, laughter echoing where angry words had lived for months. We voted to rename the HOA altogether. Doris suggested Pine Hollow Community Association. Everyone agreed. I pulled the old red "No Trespassing" sign from my truck bed, set it in the fire pit behind the hall. Flames licked across the letters, curling them inward until the word "trespass" split in two. The crowd went silent, watching. When it crumbled into gray, Len said softly, "Your dad would have liked that." "I know," I said. Marcus, ever the reporter, caught it on camera, his lens reflecting the orange glow, snow drifting through the smoke. That frame would become the thumbnail for the final upload. How we rebuilt a broken HOA. Before closing the night, I took the MIC one last time. If you believe we fought the right way, and this is how it should end, say a few words in the comments for your neighbor, your friend. Subscribe so future stories like this reach you first, and share this one so others can learn. That's on us. The next morning, the community's new charter went live online. Open audits scheduled, term limits enacted, the first ethics panel formed, chaired by Doris. Brenner's resignation notice hit the county page 2 hours later. Official cause, health and personal reasons. By February, insurers reinstated coverage. Property values rose slightly, not from polish but from peace. The local paper ran a small piece under Community Spotlight. Pine Hollow sets transparency model after turbulent year. I pinned that clipping to my cabin wall next to my dad's photo, him holding the deed we'd signed together decades ago. Beneath it, I wrote one line with his carpenter's pencil: "Open land stays open when people do too." As spring thawed the lake, I started clearing fallen branches along the drive. The sound of gravel under my boots, the smell of wet earth. It all felt new again. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I could already hear the next story forming. Another email from a homeowner in Arizona, another HOA president gone too far. I wiped my hands, looked into the lens, and said quietly, "All right, let's get to work."